why do Stratocasters sound so much better when they're tuned down to E flat? I don't know, but I'm going to make a video about it because I think that's really fascinating. And I think it's true. I think Strats really do sound better tuned down a half step. So,
welcome back to GFI Podcast, GFI System Podcast. Today we have a YouTuber, podcaster, one of the most influential guitar player on the internet today, and a personal guitar hero of mine, Rhett Shull. Welcome to the show, bro.
Thanks for the kind words, man. I don't. It's a lot to live up to, but I appreciate it. Thank you for having me on.
We have Jesse of GFI System with us today, whom you met you met in the NAMM show.
Yeah, we've met a couple times at NAMM.
What is about the bicycle thing that you have in there in Atlanta?
All right, so the cycling thing is a relatively new thing. My wife Tilly and I cycle, as well as Josh Scott from JHS Pedals. We don't cycle together because obviously Josh lives in a different city. But my wife and I got into cycling a little over a year ago. And it started because I needed something active to start doing. I used to be really into sports, but kind of weird sports. So I was a big time whitewater kayaker for a long time. I was actually an instructor in that. I used to teach classes and lead people down rivers and things like that. And then I was a big rock climber for a long time as well. And then once I got into music, I fell out of those sports because I didn't have time, and things like rock climbing are really, really hard on your hands. And I got to the point where I was like climbing 5 days a week and couldn't really play my guitar because I was getting like tinnitus, or not tinnitus, but tendinitis in my elbow and in my wrists and everything. So I had to give up the climbing. And that led to a few years of just being really sedentary and kind of not doing a lot. And during that time I was traveling and touring. So I wasn't really doing a lot active, but I was traveling all the time. And then about a year ago, the traveling started to ease up a little bit. And I got into this rhythm where I was at home making YouTube videos, which is, sitting in front of a computer or sitting down playing guitar. Or, I was just sitting all day, and I was gaining weight and feeling really crappy and eating bad. And so, I always loved riding bikes growing up, and I just decided to try out road cycling. Went out and bought a bike and started riding, and instantly fell in love with it. And my wife got a bike not long after that. And it's become this thing for us that if I don't ride at all during the week, I feel terrible. My anxiety goes through the roof. I have all this pent up energy and just stress that I can't get rid of. And it's become a huge outlet for me, because when you're on the bike for an hour or 2 hours or 3 hours, however long you're riding, all you're thinking about is riding the bike. And it really helps clear your head. It's where I start to get ideas for new videos and new things that I want to do. And I feel better. That's really what it's about.
Hey man, it's even here in Jakarta, everybody's all about bikes now. We have many bikers here at the GFI.
Yeah. Nice.
I do not know about Jesse, but definitely Jonas is. I think he bikes daily.
Nice, man. Yeah, it's funny. Like around here in Atlanta, when the pandemic hit, there's a few bike shops that we go to that I've bought a few bikes from. And there's one shop in particular that normally they have between, I think, like 700 and 800 bikes in stock at all times. It's a big shop. They keep bikes in stock. Last time I was in there a few weeks ago, they were empty. They had no bikes, because everyone, when the pandemic hit and we all went under quarantine, everyone started buying bikes and sports equipment stuff, started going out and riding, which is really cool. But now there's a shortage on bicycles, and I've got some friends now that have gotten interested in cycling and want to get into it. But it's like, well, good luck finding a bike to go ride because they're all gone. There's none for sale here anymore.
Hope that is the same case with guitar pedals.
Yeah, man.
Hey, Rhett, just to those people that wanted to know more about insight into your life, can you tell us about where you're from originally, and how does your city affects you when it comes to music and creativity?
Nice. Yeah, I grew up around this area that I still live in now. It's an area north of Atlanta, about 30 minutes north of the city of Atlanta in Georgia. And I grew up around here in a suburb, and pretty normal sort of suburban kid lifestyle, and didn't really know a lot about music growing up. Nobody in my family are musicians. My parents don't play. My grandparents don't play. I have no aunts or uncles or cousins that play. I was really the only one that when I found guitar at like 12 or 13 or 14 years old, whenever it was, that I was the only one doing music. And so, and this was also, the internet was definitely a thing, but this was before YouTube. It was before, I didn't really know about forums or ways to find information. So the first 5 or 6 years of me playing through like middle school and high school growing up, I didn't know anything. I was just kind of teaching myself and learning just songs that I would listen to. Didn't know anything about playing, didn't know anything about theory or why I was playing the way I was playing or how to practice or any of that stuff. Then I grew up, graduated high school, barely graduated high school. I was a terrible student, and went to college right out of high school for a year. I applied to like 9 or 10 different colleges all around the United States, and I only got accepted by one. Really, really small college here in Georgia called Young Harris. Tiny little school. And I went there for a year right after high school and failed miserably. Here in the States, we have like grade point average GPA, which is like, your average of all your grades. And so I guess a 4.0 is your perfect grade point average. I left my freshman year of college with a 0.8 GPA. It was below a 1.0 GPA.
Oh, you're talking to Jesse who got a 3.9 or something. And Jesse was like, is that even possible?
Yeah, it's possible. I did it, dude. I did it for sure.
Henry.
Yeah.
Do you know which college you went to?
Yeah, it was called Young Harris.
No, I mean, you went to Berkeley.
Oh, yeah. I went to Berkeley Music. Yeah.
Berkeley, yeah.
Oh, nice. Okay, yeah. So my college, after my freshman year, and I got home for summer break, they literally sent my parents a letter that said, hey, your son can't come back. His grades were so low that we won't let him come back for a second semester. And that really sucked at the time, man. I went there with my best friend that I grew up with, my friend Andrew. He and I went to college together. We were roommates. It's my first time living outside of the house, and then I had to come back home. So it was like pretty hard for me. But through all that, I still had guitar. Like I was always playing. I was always playing music and stuff. And so that was a tough time, but that was for me when I was able to kind of really dive into music. And so I came home, I got a couple of jobs. I was working like 2 or 3 jobs at a time, just trying to just make some money and figure my stuff out. And I remembered seeing a commercial when I was in high school for this music college in Atlanta called Atlanta Institute of Music. And I just randomly remembered it one day. I only ever saw the commercial one time, completely forgot about it. And a few years later, just remembered it. And I was like, you know what? I'm going to look that school up. So I went home from work, looked up AIM online, and decided like, this is really what I want to do. I want to do music. And this is a thing that I could do. So I went to my parents, and at first they were totally against the idea. They said, no, you've already failed out of one college. You know, we're not going to send you to another one. So I decided, okay, well, I'm going to do this on my own then. This is the first time I really kind of took it on myself to do something. So I filled out the application forms, filled out financial aid forms, looked up the requirements for the entrance exam. I'd never taken lessons before, so I signed up for a month of lessons from a guy who had graduated from AIM before that, so he could teach me and kind of coach me up for the audition. I scheduled the audition. I went in and got in on my first audition and went to my parents and said, hey, I got in. And at that point, they were totally in. Totally supportive and very cool about it. So I went to AIM for a year, and that was the first time that school like really clicked for me. You know, I was there for a year. The whole program was done in a year. And for those 12 months, every day, all I did was like wake up and play guitar until I went to school, and then was up until 2 or 3 in the morning every night, just playing and practicing and learning.
Right. Do you remember any particular instructors that really influenced your playing today?
Yeah, there's a couple. First and foremost, a guy named Steve Rick, who's actually a Berkeley graduated from Berkeley in the 80s. Steve was a jazz teacher. He's also my reading teacher and stuff. But he had an understanding of chords that I had never seen before. You know, being self-taught and not seeing a lot around me, most of the chords that I knew growing up were your triads, open position triads, and maybe a minor 7 here and there. And I remember watching Steve play in class for the first time. He did a chord melody of Autumn Leaves, and it just blew my mind. He was doing stuff on the neck that I didn't know you could do. He was super cool. I actually took lessons from him for a few years after I graduated. He was super cool. And then there's another guy named Carl Culpepper, who was just a monster. He was the first guy that I watched who could really shred and really play with speed and accuracy. And same thing, man. I remember watching Carl play and just being blown away that anyone could play like him. And then the other guy I'll shout out is Trey Wright. Trey was one of the jazz teachers up there. And Trey is the guy that first turned me on to listening to jazz. He played Kind of Blue in class one day, and that was the first time I'd ever really listened to jazz, and that really opened things up for me as well. So those 3 guys in particular. Yeah.
When did it hit you that you wanted to pursue guitar full time?
Well, it was when I decided to go to music school. Like I said, I didn't have any reference. I didn't know anybody that played music. I barely knew that you could make a living as a guitar player. I didn't know what it looked like at all. But I just knew, even growing up as a little kid, I would watch performances, or I'd watch stuff on TV, or I'd watch the Grammys or something, and like see the people on stage and just like, I want to do that. Like, I want to be those guys. I want to be, you know, doing what they're doing. And so when I decided to go to music school is when I was like ready to take it seriously and try and figure out how to do it.
Yeah, man, I can imagine that's a pretty courageous, because there is absolutely no job security whatsoever in music.
No, there's none. But I didn't know that. I didn't know. I just thought like, oh, you go to a guitar school and you get good at guitar, and then you just become a guitar player and you go on tour all over the world. Like, I just thought that's how it worked. It's like, you do one thing and it leads to the next thing, and then the next thing happens, you know.
Which is kind of true for you.
somewhat, you know. Yeah.
You know, I've been listening to your podcast deep into a few episodes now, and you mentioned a lot about Nashville, which is a few hours away from Atlanta. Can you tell us about Nashville and how it influenced you in any way?
Yeah. So I started going to Nashville about 5 years ago. I got hired on with a band that was based out of there called Muddy Magnolias. It was a female duo. It was like blues, rock, soul kind of stuff. It was a ton of fun to play. It was total guitar music. And we got to do a lot of really cool stuff with them. So I started going up there when I got that gig about 5 years ago and spending a lot of time up there. For the first 2 or 3 years I was on that gig, I probably spent more than half of the year in Nashville. I would go up for a week at a time for rehearsals and then come home for 2 or 3 days and then go up and leave for tour and then come home for a few days. I mean, I was spending a ton of time up there. So I got to know that town pretty well and got to develop a lot of relationships and friends up there. It's an interesting place, especially as someone who doesn't live there. As an outsider, I kind of have a different perspective on it than my friends that live there. First of all, it's really cool in that every single night of the week, 365 days a year, you can leave your house and go to one of a dozen different clubs and hear not just live music, but hear really great live music. And it's not just country music. A lot of people think Nashville's just all country. It's not. There's a great jazz scene. There's a great R&B scene. There's a huge rock scene and alternative scene there. So on, nights off, I would have friends that were playing 2 or 3 gigs all around town, and I would just jump in an Uber and go from club to club to club and catch my friends' gigs. I'd see, singer-songwriter friend of mine's doing a showcase. I'd go see that. And then, my friend Calvin's playing a jazz set. I'm going to go catch some of their set. And then, there's a late night set happening at Basement East. And we go see that. So that's something about Nashville that I've not seen in any other city. Is just the sheer amount of music happening. And there's a lot of opportunity there for players. If you want to go and be a full-time player, you want to do the hired gun thing, Nashville is the place to be, because there's so many things that happen, so many opportunities that come your way that are just by word of mouth. Oh, so-and-so's not available for this gig. Okay, cool. I've got a guy. Let me call him. And then all of a sudden you're on a new gig. It happens just like that. So
it's purely on referral basis, and it's about who you know and all those things.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us, when it comes to playing live, when was your first tour and what was it like for you?
Oh, man. I'm laughing because looking back at it now, it was such a weird experience. It was December of 2012. I was playing with a local singer-songwriter named Carl Dillon, and somehow we got booked to do an opening slot for this this guy. He had blown up on YouTube. 2011, 2012. This is when artists, you could blow up on YouTube by doing covers, and you could go viral.
Yes.
Yeah. And so this guy's name was Tyler something. I can't remember. Oh, Tyler Ward was his name. So we got booked to open for Tyler Ward, and it was up the East Coast. It was starting in Orlando and ending in New York City. And it was about a week and a half tour. And it was so thrown together and so ragtag. We didn't have a van, so Carl had to borrow a van from his wife's work. We didn't have a place to stay each night, so we were kind of figuring that out. And it wasn't a full band set. It was just me, Carl, and the drummer, Aaron. They made us do a stripped down kind of acoustic sort of set. But I absolutely loved it. I had a blast, man. It was my first time traveling. I had never been farther north than North Carolina. So it was my first time in New York City. So we had a day off in New York, and I got to see the city for the first time. It was my first time in DC. We got to play DC. So it totally hooked me, man. I was totally on to traveling and touring after that. That's all I wanted to do. Even though looking back, it was kind of a weird experience.
But back then in a year, how often that you're on the road, supposed to being at home?
Back then, I was at home all the time. I mean, I wasn't really traveling. I was gigging, but it was all local stuff. It was bars and mega church gigs, and I was teaching full time. So I would teach 5 days a week and then play bar gigs and church gigs and stuff. And then occasionally, I got to play one thing at South by Southwest that year, but that after that first tour, it was probably another year and a half before I went back out again. And then once it started happening, 2013 is when the touring stuff really started for me. Yeah.
And what is your favorite venues to play, or maybe favorite countries that you ever played at?
Man. Well, my favorite venues. Last year I got to go out with an artist named Jesse Wilson, and we were opening for the Black Keys. We were the first of three. It was us, Modest Mouse, and the Black Keys, and that was a ton of fun. Incredible experience.
That's so dope, dude.
It was a lot of fun. But we played one venue there. It's called the Anthem. It's in Washington D.C.
Okay.
It was by far the smallest venue we played, but it's like a big open club. It's like a giant rock club. And that's my favorite venue I've ever played because the crowd is right there up on the stage. It's general admission. So even as the opener, you're playing for a full house because people got there early.
Yep.
And it was electric, man. It was so cool.
Yeah, man. I remember seeing a singer-songwriter thing in 930 Club in DC.
Yeah.
Is it still there?
Oh, yeah. It's 930 Club and the Anthem. They're the same. They're owned by the same people, and they're part of the same like block. Yeah.
I had a good time in DC. I think surprisingly, it's a good music town. Also,
it's a great music town, man. They've got the go-go scene there that's been happening since like the late '60s. That's kind of unique to DC. And then, Dave Grohl is originally from there. In fact, he's one of the owners of the Anthem, which is part of why that club is so great. Is because it's owned by an artist, and they know how to make a great venue.
One last thing about playing live. What is the best show that you ever played, in your opinion? Any moments that came to your mind? You shared in your second episode with Tilly that your parents came to the show. One of the biggest crowd that you've been to, something like that.
Yeah. So, man, there's been a couple of just really great shows. Well, actually more than a couple. There's been a bunch. I'd say one of the most recent ones that comes to mind was with Jessie about a year ago. We played her album release show in Nashville. And that was incredible. She had been working on this record for over a year, and we sold out the room we were in. And just the crowd that was there, it was so cool. It was diverse. There was all ages there, all backgrounds, all cultures. It was awesome. And they broadcast it live on the radio in Nashville. And but yeah, I think I made a video about that one. The crowd there was just insane. And then a year ago, I got to play in London with Noah Guthrie. We played this festival called Nashville Meets London. And that was when my pedal board broke down because TSA ripped it apart. But that was one of the best shows I've ever played. And there's been a lot. I'm really lucky to have had some really cool experiences on stage.
So what happened when your pedal board broke down? What's the plan B?
I went straight into the amp.
There you go.
Yeah, just straight in. Luckily, I had a really great backline amp. It was an AC30, but it was an early 90s AC30. So it was the Korg era when Korg owned Vox. And I believe that those amps were actually built by Marshall. I think Korg contracted Marshall to build those AC30s. And those are my favorite ones, man. The early 90s, the ones with the Alnico blues in them. Yes. They sound amazing. So I had one of those as my backline. And because we were in England, it was running at 220.
Yeah.
240 instead of 120.
240, yeah.
So amps, when they're higher voltage like that, when they're running at a higher voltage, they feel different than American amps do. And so, yeah, I literally my pedal board didn't work. I plugged my guitar straight into the front of the amp and basically turned it almost all the way up and rode my volume knob the whole show.
Balls, man, balls.
It was great.
Hey, man, you mentioned that, and even mentioned on the few of your YouTube videos that mega church. You play in the church. Me being a church player, worship music, and our friend Josh is a mega church guitar player.
Nice.
Just wondering, what is your thought process when it comes to preparing yourself playing for Sunday music?
Well, I don't do those gigs anymore. I got out of that world about a year and a half ago. And I had been doing it for almost 10 years, I think. The thing here in Atlanta, if you are a full-time player, no matter your instrument, if you play music full-time, you almost guaranteed you have some kind of church gig that's regular routine. And there's a culture of players here that's their primary thing. They just play the churches, and you're on kind of a rotation around the mega churches around Atlanta. There's a lot of them here. So I did that for a long time. Ended up playing places like North Point and Free Chapel and Victory World Church. And I'm really grateful for that time because it taught me a lot about music, and it got me a lot of time on stage. I mean, twice a week, every week for probably 7 or 8 years, I was on stage.
It's true.
Playing with real people. And that's really valuable time, no matter what type of music you're playing. Like, that's really, really valuable experience to have. So I'm really grateful for that time. I got really burned out on the culture. I know some really great people in that world, but it also, at least in Atlanta, got to be like a really toxic culture, at least for me, for a while. So that's why I ended up moving out. But in terms of playing, you kind of get to the point where, especially in worship music, it's a common language, right? It's a common musical, it's a lot of the same elements that are recurring through different artists and different songs, as well as different churches. Like, different churches will play, depending on who the music director is and the band and everything, you may play the same song 4 different ways at 4 different churches. So you start to learn, okay, cool, this weekend I'm at North Point. I know they're going to look for these kind of things in terms of my tone, in terms of my playing. I know that we're probably going to do these kind of things with the arrangements. So I got to the point where I could look at my schedule, see where I was going to be, look at the set list, and that was kind of it. I didn't really prepare much else for that. Unless there was like a special song or something that was like a Christmas set or something that was bigger than a typical Sunday, I wouldn't usually actually practice or prepare for it. And that was a personal thing for me, because I preferred going into a rehearsal with sort of a fresh perspective, like having not listened to the tracks. So I was the type of player that I didn't want to play what was on the record. I wanted to like do my thing. Which luckily most of the churches and the music directors were really cool with.
Oh yeah, for sure, man. Yeah, I agree with you, man. Like, but the airtime is precious.
Yeah.
Especially when you play in the church, you got to play with other guitar players. And I find it quite unique for guitar players to play with other guitar players, is especially if they're better than you. And
yes.
Right. And it's precious still.
Yeah. I spent a lot of time playing with a guy named Benjamin Forehand. Ben's a close friend of mine. And he's a GFI user. He switched, I think he might have 2 specular Tempests on his board now, but Ben was that guy for me. Ben is a little older than me. He's a monster guitar player. In fact, just last night, he lives in Nashville now, but he was from here in Atlanta. Just last night, he recorded a live album with Tasha Cobbs at the Ryman. So he's still big in the worship world and the gospel world and stuff. But that was it for me for a long time. It was like I used to be so scared to get booked with Ben on Sunday mornings, because he was so much better than me and so much more musically advanced and mature than I was. But I'm really grateful for those times, because he really taught me how to play with another guitar player on stage. And it all comes down to listening. You have to be listening to what the other person is doing and fit what you're doing in with what they're doing. Same thing with a rhythm section, man. You need to be listening to the bass player and the drummer and fit in with what they are doing. And if you're not doing that, you're not really playing with people. You're kind of doing your own thing on top of what else is going on, and that's not very musical, you know.
For younger musicians who are listening to this episode, what is your advice for the younger musicians to lift up the musicianship insecurity?
Man, that's that's a lot. I mean, I think so. I always say this thing at the end of my videos, the whole "there is no plan B" thing.
Yeah.
For me, that's something that I say to kind of remind myself of it, and I put at the end of the videos to kind of remind myself of it. And it's this idea that when you decide to do something, you should do it with the intent of there not being a backup plan. It doesn't literally mean like, hey, don't plan for this not to work out, or don't plan for the worst. It just means like, hey, when you decide to do music, you should wake up every single day and treat it as if you have no other option, and treat it as if this is your only plan. With that sort of tenacity and that drive. It's something that's helped me out a lot. And I forget where I heard it for the first time, but yeah, I have this like metal sign up in my YouTube like video room here that I look at that says there is no plan B. And I think that's probably the best thing I could say. You know, it's when you decide to do something, you just do it.
I'm sure Jesse have some questions for you.
Like this morning, I saw an article on the New York Times. Rick Beato, your mentor, made a post about the article, and it says, and I quote, "Well, it's never too late to start a YouTube career."
Mm-hmm.
Have you read that article?
I haven't read it yet, but I know about it. Yeah.
Yeah, and I quote inside within the article, and I quote, it says, "A millennial age intern encouraged him to put himself in more videos and start a YouTube channel, but Mr. Beato wasn't sure." So when I read this, I was wondering if that intern was you. Was it?
Yeah, that was me. It was. I had been working for Rick for a few years at that point. This would have been like 2016, like June, I think, of 2016. And I met Rick in early 2013 with that artist Carl Dillon that I went on my first tour. Not long after that first tour, Carl went to make a record and wanted Rick to produce it, because Rick had produced a band called Need to Breathe that was pretty popular in that kind of Americana soul singer-songwriter scene. So we went to Rick's studio, and that was literally my first time ever setting foot in a recording studio before. I'd never really seen one. And we ended up making a record. It took about 2 weeks. My first time playing on a record. I had no idea what I was doing. But Rick and his engineer, Ken, who we called GL, were really cool. And I totally got addicted to the whole studio thing. I was sold. I loved it. And so after that record was done, I went to Rick and GL and asked them, I was like, hey, would you guys be cool if I just started coming by and hanging out? Like, I want to learn about this stuff. And not long after that, they brought me on as an intern, and I interned there for a few years. And I was able to run sessions and play on a bunch of records. And it was a huge, huge learning experience for me. And so after a few years of doing that, and then, getting some other gigs and stuff, Rick had started to mess around by doing these little live streams on Periscope. If anybody remembers Periscope. Yeah, he would do these live streams on Periscope where he would just sit there for like 3 or 4 hours with nobody on, like maybe 1 or 2 people on, and just talk about stuff and teach stuff. And So I came to the studio one day and I was like, man, you should really think about starting a YouTube channel. I think it could be really cool for you if you were, teaching music and doing stuff. And he was like, no, I don't. Nobody wants to watch some old dude on YouTube. I was like, I don't know, man. I think it could work. And so I helped him shoot his first few videos. And I edited his channel trailer, which is still up on his channel. I actually shot and edited for him. And it just, dude, it took off from there. And that's that same kind of thing. Once he decided to do it, the first year on YouTube, he made a video every single day. I think in the first 12 months, he made almost 400 videos, which is insane. But that's, now look at where it's gotten him.
The rest is history, yeah.
Yeah.
When it comes to YouTube, after 122 videos, well, first of all, how you got into YouTube's and the thought process behind it, and what is the lesson learned for you?
Well, I always loved YouTube. I started watching YouTube in like 2011. That's really when it started to kind of pick up and become its own thing. It started in 2006, but it wasn't really until 2010 or 11 where it kind of became what we know to be what it is today. So I just would watch it all the time, and I still do. I still watch YouTube as my primary, I don't really watch Netflix or any of those stuff. I follow YouTube channels. And right around that 2015 timeframe is when Casey Neistat really started to blow up.
Yeah.
And a lot of people, I was watching Casey's channel and just so fascinated by it. Here's a dude sharing stories and making films every day about his life. And it was really, really cool. So around that time is when I started thinking about making a YouTube channel, and I would make a few videos here and there and put them up. And I remember I decided, I was like, okay, I'm going to start making vlogs, and I made a couple and put them up. And I went to a church gig one day, or went to a rehearsal, and a couple of the guys in the band had seen one of the vlogs I put up, and they were making fun of me. They're like, oh, Rhett's a vlog. Dude, you bringing your camera? You going to vlog now? You going to do your thing? And it really got in my head. And so I deleted the videos, took them down, and no, I'm not gonna do YouTube. And so I let that stop me for a few years. And then Rick's channel started taking off and doing really well. And I was on tour performing, and in 2018, January of 2018, the band Bloody Magnolias that I was in, they broke up. The two girls, the artists, broke up, and so my touring gig had pretty much ended. And so I just got married. We were living in Atlanta, and I was like, you know what? I want to start making YouTube videos, and just started doing it. Just started making them with that same kind of idea of, I just decided to do it. I had no subscribers, no views, but once I decided to start making the videos, I just kept making them as if I kind of just decided okay, I make YouTube videos now. This is part of my career.
How do you keep yourself disciplined in making YouTube? What is the thought process like? Do you have a schedule?
No. I'm probably the least disciplined person.
It doesn't look like one.
Well, I'm serious, man. I can't handle routine. It's probably something I should go to a therapist about or something, but the thought of routine or a schedule freaks me out. I can't do it. So I guess my process is, I get an idea for a video, and then I make that video and I just put it out. And sometimes that means I make one video a week. Sometimes that means I make 3 videos a week. Like today, I just got an idea for a video. Why do Stratocasters sound so much better when they're tuned down to E flat? I don't know, but I'm going to make a video about it because I think that's really fascinating. And I think it's true. I think Strats really do sound better tuned down a half step. So, that's kind of the thought process.
I think not only Strat that goes to.
Yeah. But it is unique to the Strat though, because I feel like Les Pauls, a Les Paul doesn't sound, there's something that happens to a Strat when you tune it down a half step that like a Les Paul or a 335 doesn't really do. And maybe it's the pickups, maybe it's the scale length. I don't know.
When it comes to gears, at least in America, and in your opinion, how do what do you think about the way maybe younger guitar players or more experienced guitar players purchase their gears? Is it more into online, or is it the traditional, more like Guitar Center stuff?
I think it's a combination. When I kind of started getting into gear, it's still here. There's a shop in Atlanta called Atlanta Discount Music. I was just there the other day, actually. And that was, that was before like guitar YouTube was really a thing. Like you couldn't really go, you had Andy at Pro Guitar Shop doing stuff. But aside from that, there wasn't a whole lot out there. So I would go to this shop like once or twice a week and just ask the guy, Jimmy, at that shop. I'd ask him questions like, hey, what does this pedal do? Or like, what's the difference between an overdrive and a distortion? Or like, why would you need a boost pedal? Like, I just ask him stuff, and they were really cool. They would teach me stuff. And I think the way people buy gear now, there's always going to be, especially for guitar players, there's always going to be a need to put your hands on the piece of gear first, especially things like guitars, man. Like, it's so hard to buy a guitar sight unseen off of the internet. I know a ton of people do it, but I don't know, man. If you're spending your hard-earned money on something that's like an instrument, you really want to play it first. Pedals, I think, are a different thing. You can go online, you can watch some videos, you can hear some examples, and then like order a pedal. Right. Amps, maybe even the same way, but guitars, you really have to put your hands on it first.
Tell us about this with Novo guitars. How many you own, and how you got to know Matthew Thiemann, and what's the story behind it?
All right, so I have 3 Novos. Currently, there are 4 in my possession, but I only own 3. I have to give one of them back, which I'm not excited about. So the Novo thing started about 2.5 years ago, 3 years ago. I don't know. I was traveling, I was touring at the time, and I was looking for a P90 guitar. I'd never owned a guitar with P90s in it. And I went to a local shop here in Atlanta called Rhetts Guitars. And the guy, Ben, there was really cool. And I went to look, they had a vintage ES330. It was like a 67 ES330, but it was late 60s Gibsons are real weird. They're real hit or miss. Some of them are good, but this one had like the real narrow nut width and just, it was kind of a dog. But while I was there, he's like, hey, I've got a P90 guitar that I think you really dig. And he pulled off this strange looking pink sparkle guitar off the wall. And at first I was like, I don't know about that. That's a little out there. But my wife, Tilly, was with me at the shop. And as soon as Ben grabbed it off the wall, Tilly was infatuated, but she loved it. She's like, oh yeah, that thing's awesome. So I took it in the room and just played it unplugged. I just strummed an A9 chord on it. And it rang like a bell. I mean, it was so resonant. And instantly I was like, this one's, it was way out of my budget, way out of my price range. But yeah, I played it, was blown away by it. And for the next like 3 or 4 weeks, all I could do was think about that guitar. I went back to the shop 3 or 4 times and played it. So my wife, Tilly, ended up telling me, like, you need to buy that guitar. You need that guitar. So I had a Telly, I had a Les Paul. I sold that. I sold some pedals. I maxed out a credit card. I completely blew out my savings account and went and bought that guitar.
Best decision ever.
It really was. Like, looking back now, it really was the best decision ever. I literally just walked into Righteous with every dollar I had to my name. Just like, here, take this. So yeah, man, I not long after that though, it has a Mastery bridge on it, Mastery bridge and tremolo on it. And I kept taking the tremolo arm out to put it in the case. And I didn't know you're not supposed to do that. So one day I was on a gig and the tremolo arm got jammed. It got stuck. Like it wouldn't move, couldn't get it out. So I reached out to Novo on Instagram, just sent him a message, said, hey, I bought this guitar. This thing's stuck. And to make a long story short, they had just moved to Nashville and were just setting up shop there. And I went up for a rehearsal one day and took the guitar by, and that's when I met Dennis and Matthew. And that's, the rest is history, man. We've all been friends ever since.
Hey, man, you gave me an idea. Maybe we should, if they have a reseller here in Asia or Indonesia, if they have not already, I'm available, or we are available. Tell them.
Yeah, they're awesome, man. I can't say enough good things about those people. Like they've all become close friends of mine. Every time Tilly and I go up to Nashville, we always spend time at the shop hanging out or go grab dinner with them. Dennis Fano is a legend. I really do believe that he will go down as one of the greatest guitar designers and builders ever. I think he's up there with Leo Fender and Paul Reed Smith and, Ted McCarty and all those guys. He's a legend.
Yeah, man, I'm definitely going to check him out. Dude, we can go on and on, but, before we end this episode, just wondering what is your thoughts about GFI and can you tell us a story about the first time you tried GFI, how you encountered the GFI system?
Yeah, it was through the Specular Tempest. And the Cab Zeus, actually. The first time I heard about you guys was through the Cab Zeus. I had made a video on making a pedal board that was designed to go direct. So I used, I'm trying to remember what I had on the board. It was the Revival Drive from Origin. That was basically the preamp, kind of amp sim. And then I was using an H9 as my modulation and things like that. And there was something else on the board too. I can't remember what it was, but I didn't have any kind of cab simulator on it. So I was having to use the cab sim in Logic, which actually worked pretty well. It was cool. And so people started commenting on that video. They're like, dude, you got to check out the Cab Zeus. You got to get a Cab Zeus. It's perfect. Get the Cab Zeus. And so I started looking into the Cab Zeus. And this was right before NAMM, my first winter NAMM show, which was the January 2019 NAMM show. And so we all met there and got my hands on a Cab Zeus and a Specular Tempest. And I remember getting home with the Specular Tempest and starting to play with it. And it sounded, the thing that I really liked, you guys have the only shimmer reverb that I think is actually usable. Shimmer gets kind of like, it's sort of cliche and it's sort of it's been done so much now that it sounds kind of corny, but there's that dark shimmer algorithm on the Specular Tempest that was just magical. Yeah, man. When
you did this video on the mini pedal HX Stomp with the Tempest, you touched a lot of hearts, and we would like to thank you for doing that, and it really inspires a lot of people.
Yeah, well, I appreciate that, man, and that board was supposed to be. So the HX Stomp board with the Tempest was supposed to be my fly board for this year. I had a lot of like one-off sort of fly dates happening, and so I was gearing up to make that like. Just throw that in a small case, carry a guitar on, carry the board on. And then obviously it's not happening this year. So that board's not seeing much action, but right now I'm actually in the process. I don't know if I can, it'll be kind of hard to show you on the camera here, but I'm working on, so we've started this new live show on my channel called Backstage Live.
Yeah, man.
Where we're all, playing. We got a live band from the home studio, and we're putting on shows. And so I'm working with Mason Marangella from Vertex Effects on building a rig for that show, because every show is different. Every set is different. And there's also a big improvisational element to what we're doing. And so I want a rig that, A, I can swap stuff in and out pretty easily in terms of drives and fuzzes and things. And B, I can instantly kind of have an idea for a sound in my head and make it happen while we're playing in real time. And so I'm working on that board, and a big part of that board is going to be the synesthesia. So I've got the synesthesia thrown on right now, and I'm pairing it with an HX effects and letting the synesthesia handle all the modulation stuff and the HX effects handle the delays and reverbs. And that's going to be a really cool combination.
Oh, man, we look forward for that. It's going to be live in like what, in a few days? Was it?
Yeah. The second episode is this Sunday, which is August 9th, 2020. It'll be at 5 p.m. Eastern time. We've got our first guest artist coming on, which I'm really excited about.
Can you share about it?
Yeah, so it's first guest artist. I'm not going to give away who it is yet. We're going to kind of let that be a surprise. But if anyone's followed my channel for a while, they probably have a good idea of who it might be. And we're going to do a combination of the artist's original music, but through the lens of my band. So the band I've put together for this show, Jamie Porti, Chad Collins, and Philip Conrad, are some of the most killer musicians I've ever played with. And so the idea is to bring in a guest artist and play some of their songs with this band. So kind of rework the stuff as well as do some cool covers. So I'm incredibly excited about this next episode, man. There's gonna be some cool stuff happening.
Dude, how long is the show going to be? How long is the set list?
It's going to be about a little over an hour. So we've got about 10 songs. Some of the songs are just going to be with the band, and then we'll bring in the artist and do some original stuff and some covers with them. And there's going to be a couple other elements in there that you have to catch it live to see.
Yeah, for sure.
But this is a monthly thing. We're doing the show every month. And the dream with this is to grow this thing and have this be, once the pandemic and quarantine kind of thing is over, we can actually start playing music again.
Yeah, for sure.
I want to take this band out on the road and make a record and do it,
Yeah, man. The guys, we should set the reminders on YouTube for Backstage Live episode 2. We'll put that on the show notes. And, normally in the end of the episode, we always ask what's the best way to reach you, but it's so obvious. It's rhettshull.com or from Instagram.com/rhettshull. Definitely post-pandemic, not only you gonna tour out again, but you will come here, right?
I would love to. I would absolutely love to go to Indonesia.
I think Jesse already prepared some durian for you with complimentary poop coffee.
Yeah, you brought over some really famous artists to Indonesia. He brought Alter Bridge to Indonesia.
Back in the days.
Nice.
Blackbird.
Nice.
The 2013. Yeah.
Nice, man.
Time. Yeah, man. Jesse, would you like to have any final words officially from GFI maybe?
It's been a pleasure knowing you, Rhett. Yeah, I've been following your channel on YouTube. It's been a treasure of information. You're always up to date on gears, and we watch you very closely. And thanks for being very responsive to our messages. And we hope we can come by someday.
And
thanks, man.
Please.
Sorry, I was going to say thank you. You guys have been really, really great to work with, and just good people. That's something that I've really been pleased to see as I've gotten into this side of the industry, is is people like you who are just genuinely good people that are into music and into guitar and into sounds and tones and want to make stuff that works well. So yeah, likewise, it's been great working with you guys and getting to know you guys, and hopefully we can do it more in the future.
Yeah.
All right, man. Thanks, Rhett Shull, and this is GFI Podcast.